Why was she the only one, without a nameplate on her uniform? The others had them, stamped, polished, worn like a badge of belonging. Hers was gone, removed quietly days ago. At the briefing table, no one mentioned it, but she noticed the way their eyes skipped past her, the way silence pressed heavier around her chair. It was as though she had been erased but still allowed to sit among them. She sat upright, still, unmoving. The low hum of the projector filled the room as satellite images flickered across the wall. A desert valley, routes marked in red, enemy positions in blue. The commander's voice cut through, sharp, rehearsed. This is where we'll breach, minimal noise, maximum precision, and no mistakes. Her hand stayed clasped in her lap. The others scribbled notes. She didn't. She remembered every detail the first time. Always had. That was both her gift and her curse. But the erasure, why did it matter? Why, after everything, had they taken her name? She glanced down at the fabric of her uniform. The empty patch felt heavier than any weapon she had carried. No one dared ask her. They thought she wouldn't notice. Or maybe they thought she didn't deserve the question. But she knew the truth. She hadn't been born for war. And yet, war had found her, reshaped her, demanded more than she ever thought she had to give. And that's why they feared her. The briefing ended, chairs scraped, boots shuffled, the team dispersed, but she stayed seated, listening, the echo of their voices down the hallway fading, then silence. Only then did she stand, slowly, deliberately, as though carrying invisible weight. She had been here before, different mission, different terrain, same quiet tension before the storm, and always the same question, how much of herself would she lose this time? Outside, the air smelled of diesel and dust. Helicopters idled in the distance, blades slicing the morning haze. She walked past them, her pace steady, her face unreadable. Inside, though, inside was the battlefield no one saw. She remembered another morning. A farm years ago. The scent of rain-soaked soil, chickens scratching near the fence. Her father's voice calling her by name. That nameplate was more than metal. It was the last thread tying her to the girl who once laughed at sunsets and believed life was something tender. That girl was gone, the soldier remained, but history, it wouldn't dare forget her. Not after what she'd done, not after what she was about to do. A shadow fell across her path. One of the men, tall, broad-shouldered, his rifle slung casually. He smirked, nodding at the blank space on her chest. "Guess you're just a ghost now." She didn't flinch, didn't answer, just met his eyes until his grin faltered and he stepped aside. Silence was sharper than any retort. She learned that long ago. Inside the hangar, weapons were being checked, ammunition lined up in neat rows. A young private, barely 20, struggled with his gear. His hands shook as he tried to lock the magazine. She watched him for a moment. His lips moved, muttering something under his breath. A prayer, maybe. "Twist it," she said softly, finally breaking her silence. He startled, looking up at her. "Not force, twist, then push." He followed her instruction. The magazine clicked. Relief washed over his face. "Thanks," he whispered. She gave a single nod, then moved on. Little things like that mattered. Small mercies in the middle of cruelty. She learned to offer them when she could, because the world was already too loud with violence. The mission clock ticked closer, hours thinning into minutes. She loaded her rifle, the familiar weight grounding her. Every weapon carried a memory, every memory a scar. She thought of the last mission, the one no one spoke of, the reason her name was gone, the one where orders had clashed with conscience and she had chosen conscience, chosen life, chosen differently than they expected. That choice had saved people, but it had cost her identity. Now they let her fight but without belonging. They let her breathe but without a name. The irony was sharp. They erased her, yet when things turned impossible they would look to her first. They always did. The helicopter bay filled with sound, rotors spinning, shouts over the roar, the metallic clatter of gear. She climbed aboard, finding her seat among them. Again, silence. Again, eyes that slid away from hers. But one pair lingered, a sergeant she trusted. He leaned close, his words nearly drowned by the engine. "You shouldn't even be here after last time." She met his gaze, calm, unshaken, and yet here I am. He shook his head, a bitter smile tugging at his lips. "You'll be the death of us or the reason we make it out alive, never in between." The helicopter lifted, dust spiraled below. The base shrank into nothing but lines and specks. The desert stretched endless, merciless ahead. Inside the aircraft, vibrations rattled bones. The team checked gear in silence. No chatter, just the heavy rhythm of anticipation. She closed her eyes. The world narrowed to sound. The low thrum of rotors, the faint jingle of dog tags, the crackle of the intercom. And beneath it all, the echo of her father's voice, years gone, saying words that haunted her still. "You weren't born for war, Nina. Don't let them take all of you." But they had, piece by piece, until she wasn't sure what remained. She opened her eyes, staring into the horizon through the open side of the aircraft. The sky was bleeding orange, the sun sinking behind distant ridges, beauty and violence in the same frame. Something stirred in her chest. Not fear, not hope, something in between, a tension she had never named. Then the pilot's voice cracked through the headset. 10 minutes. The men shifted, adjusted straps, gripped rifles tighter. She breathed in slow, let it settle. She was ready, she always was, but there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. The helicopter dipped lower, skimming the valley. Shadows stretched long across the sand. The wind stung her face. The ground drew closer. And in the silence of her mind, a single thought repeated like a drumbeat. This isn't about orders. This isn't about them. This is about me and what I can't leave unfinished. The skids touched down, dust exploded around them, boots hit the earth. The mission had begun. But her story, the one that history would never dare forget, was only just unfolding. Who was the first to step into the valley of silence? Not the captain, not the sergeant, it was her. Boots pressed into shifting sand, soft but certain, as though she belonged to the terrain itself. She moved with that quiet assurance that unsettled people, like she could see paths before they revealed themselves. The others followed, but there was hesitation in their steps, a weight in their movements. She carried no such hesitation, not anymore. The air was dry, sharp, tasting of dust and iron. The valley walls loomed, jagged and watchful, casting long shadows that swallowed them whole. Somewhere ahead, beyond rock and ruin, men waited with weapons and plans to kill them. And yet the silence was louder than any threat. She raised her fist, halting the team. The signal was simple, universal, but when she gave it, it carried gravity. They froze, rifles angled, breath stilled. She crouched, scanning the terrain. Nothing moved. No sound, no obvious threat, but something was wrong. She felt it, the way a bird senses the storm before the sky darkens. Her pulse slowed, sharpened. She let her breathing guide her vision, steady, controlled, until every shadow told its story. And there it was there. A glint, too small for most eyes, caught in the dying light. A scope watching them. She tilted her head, just enough for the sergeant behind her to catch it. He followed her line of sight, muttered a curse under his breath. The captain's voice crackled in her earpiece. "Why are we stopped?" She didn't answer, not yet. Answers had to be earned, not rushed. Instead, she lifted her rifle, settling the stock against her shoulder. Her breath slowed. In, out. The world narrowed to a single line, a single shimmer of glass hidden between rocks. One pull of the trigger, and the shimmer vanished. Silence again, but a different silence, heavier, like the valley was holding its breath. Now she spoke, her voice low but steady. "Eyes were on us." The captain cursed softly, his confidence shaken. He hadn't seen. None of them had, only her. They moved again, more careful now, shadows among shadows. She carried on, her face expressionless, but inside a storm was building. Because the scope, that wasn't random. They were expected. Someone had whispered their arrival into the wind. And she hadn't told them yet that she already knew who. They trekked deeper into the valley. The rocks funneled them into narrow passages, walls towering, the sky just a strip of fatting blue above. Her ears caught everything, the shuffle of boots, the soft click of rifles being adjusted, the faint drip of water somewhere unseen. Every sound mattered. A young corporal stumbled on loose gravel, swore under his breath. She reached out instinctively, steadying him before he could fall. His gratitude flashed in his eyes, but he didn't say it. Words weighed too much here. They pressed on. Night crept in fast, swallowing the last of the sun. Darkness was no stranger to her. It had been her companion long before this war. The kind of darkness that crept not from the sky but from within. When the order came to set up a temporary perimeter, she volunteered for the outer watch. No one argued. No one wanted to sit where the shadows felt closest. She lay prone against the cold ground, rifle trained on the valley mouth. The wind whispered across the sand, carrying with it scents of oil and sweat and something faintly metallic. Her body was still, but her mind wandered, backward, always backward. To the day everything shifted. She hadn't chosen to enlist. Not really. She had chosen escape. Escape from a life too small, a grief too heavy, a silence too suffocating. The uniform had offered structure, purpose, a cage that at least gave shape to her chaos. And she had excelled, not because she sought war, but because she understood suffering. She could read it, anticipate it, endure it. And then the mission, the one they never spoke of, the one that stripped her name. She had broken protocol. Some called it betrayal. She called it conscience. She had spared lives when the order demanded none. And though the reports were buried, the whispers were not. She carried them like chains. That was why she hadn't told them everything now, because she suspected betrayal again. Different place, same shadow, and this time if she spoke too soon, no one would believe her. Not until blood proved her right. A stone shifted in the dark. Her finger tightened on the trigger. A pause, another shift, too deliberate to be the wind. Movement, she whispered into her calm. The team stirred, rifles raised, shadows stretched, silence cracked. And then it began. Gunfire tore through the night, echoing off the walls, deafening in the narrow valley. Muzzle flashes flared like violent stars. Shouts collided with bullets. The team scattered for cover, returning fire, voices sharp with panic. She stayed low, steady. Her scope found targets one by one. Breath, aim, squeeze, again. She moved with precision, detached yet burning inside. Each shot was a thread in a tapestry of survival. But it wasn't enough. They were outnumbered. The ambush had been laid too perfectly. She rolled behind a rock, reloading with practiced speed. Grit bit her cheek. Dust filled her lungs. Around her, men screamed orders, curses, prayers. The sergeant's voice cut through, hoarse. "We're pinned, got 'em it, we're pinned." She scanned, searching for the source. Then she saw it, the ridge above, where shadows poured steady fire down into the valley. That was the nest. Take it out and they'd have a chance. But no one else saw it. No one else could. She pressed her calm. "Ridge northeast, 2 gunners." "Negative," the captain snapped back. "We don't have line of sight." "I do." A pause, hesitation, doubt. She didn't wait for permission. Some things required action, not approval. She shifted, belly crawling across the ground, every inch a risk. Bullets hissed, snapped, spat against rock. She ignored them. The world shrank again, just her rifle, the line to her target. She exhaled, 1, 2. 2 shots, 2 bodies crumpled. The pressure eased, just enough for the team to regroup, to push forward, to breathe. But still the fight raged. Chaos, smoke, fire. She moved among it like a ghost, unseen, unheard, but essential. Until a scream pierced through the young private, the one she'd helped earlier. He was down, clutching his side, blood seeping fast. She slid to him, her hands pressing hard against the wound. His eyes were wide, terrified. "I don't want to die," he whispered, voice breaking. She locked eyes with him. "You're not going to." Her voice was steady, but inside the old fear clawed at her. The fear of loss. The fear of watching someone slip away while she could do nothing. Not again, not this time. Bullets tore the dirt around them, but she stayed, pressing down, holding his life between her hands. "Stay with me, stay." And in that moment, something inside her cracked. Not weakness, not doubt, but the memory of her brother. The one she couldn't save years ago. The one whose death had driven her here, into uniforms and rifles and wars. She saw his face in the boy's eyes, and she swore silently, fiercely, that she would not fail again. The firefight dragged, brutal, endless. Minutes stretched like hours, but slowly, through grit and desperation, the team pushed back, one shot at a time, one breath at a time. And then silence again, heavy, final. The valley reeked of gunpowder and blood. Bodies lay scattered. Smoke drifted in lazy trails. The private was still alive, barely, his breathing shallow but steady. She kept her hand on him until the medic arrived, until she was sure he wouldn't slip away. Only then did she stand, covered in dust, her chest heaving, her eyes burning. The captain approached, sweat streaking his face, fury barely restrained. "You disobeyed a direct order." She met his glare, calm, cold. "I saved your men." He said nothing because he knew, they all knew. And as they gathered the wounded, as they counted the living against the dead, she felt the weight of what she hadn't told them pressing heavier still. Because tonight was just the beginning. And the betrayal waiting for them, it was closer than they realized. What did silence mean after a firefight? To some it meant victory, to others reprieve. To her it meant danger, because silence never lasted. The valley lay littered with echoes. Spent shells glinted in the dirt like scattered teeth. The air stank of sweat and iron. Men moved slowly, deliberately, like the fight had aged them 10 years in minutes. She stood apart, eyes on the ridgeline where she had made her shots. Two bodies still slumped there, vague shadows against rock. She felt no pride, just inevitability. The private she'd saved was being lifted onto a stretcher, pale and trembling. His lips moved faintly. She caught the word, "Thanks," before morphine dulled his consciousness. Her chest tightened almost imperceptibly. She didn't let it show. The captain was packing, jaw clenched, fury simmering. Every step screamed accusation. When he stopped in front of her, the valley seemed to hold its breath. "You don't get to rewrite command in the middle of a fight," he said, low, controlled, but his eyes burned. She met his stare, unflinching. "We'd all be dead if I waited." His fists tightened, but words failed him. Around them, men averted their eyes. No one wanted to choose a side, not out loud, not yet. The sergeant finally spoke, voice hoarse. "We need to move. Night isn't our friend here." The captain hesitated. Then he nodded sharply. "Fine, pack it up, we push forward." And just like that, authority reasserted itself. But fractures had formed, quiet, dangerous cracks in trust. They moved out slower now, burdened by wounds and weariness. The desert night pressed in cold, the stars too bright, indifferent. Every sound carried further, the scuff of boots, the clatter of gear, the ragged rhythm of breath. She walked rear guard, scanning the darkness behind them. It was instinct, never trust silence to mean safety. Her thoughts spiraled inward unbidden. She remembered a different night years ago, rain pounding tin roofs, her brother coughing in the dark, fever burning him from the inside. She was only 16, powerless, clutching his hand as his breaths grew shallow. No medic, no miracle, just the slow surrender of life. And when dawn came, he was gone. That loss had hollowed her. It had driven her into uniform, into training, into places no one thought she belonged. She hadn't been born for war, but grief had made her its apprentice. Now, watching the private struggle on the stretcher, she felt the echo of that night. The same helplessness clawed at her, but this time she had power. This time she could fight. And yet, she couldn't fight what was coming from within her own ranks. Hours bled into each other. The team reached a jagged outcrop, stone teeth rising from sand, and made camp in its shadow. No fires, just rations eaten in silence, water passed carefully hand to hand. She sat alone, rifle across her knees, eyes on the horizon. The sergeant approached, lowering himself beside her with a grunt. He chewed slowly, eyes never leaving the dark. For a long while neither spoke. Finally he said, "You've got them spooked." She didn't answer. "You scare people," he continued. "Not because of what you do, because of what you don't say." Her gaze flicked to him. His face was lined, weary but not unkind. He studied her a moment longer. "You're carrying something, and it's not just ghosts." Her throat tightened. She wanted to speak, to spill the weight she'd kept locked, but not yet, not here. Instead she asked, "Why do you stay?" He huffed a dry laugh. "Because someone has to. Someone has to hold the line, even if no one remembers the names." He glanced at her chest, at the empty patch where her name should be. "Guess you understand that better than anyone." The silence between them deepened, heavy but not hostile, almost human. When he left, she sat longer, staring into the desert. Somewhere out there, betrayal waited. She knew it like she knew her own heartbeat. And still she said nothing. Sleep was fractured, shallow. Every rustle of sand set her nerves on edge. Dawn broke pale and merciless, painting the rocks in muted gold. The team rose stiff, weary but moving because there was no choice. By midday, heat pressed down hard, sweat-soaking uniforms, tempers thinning. The medic checked the private every hour, shaking his head with grim resignation. Supplies were running thin. Time was running thinner. Then came the sound. A drone, high-pitched, insectal, growing louder. Eyes turned upward, searching the glare of the sky. Her heart clenched. She knew that sound too well. The captain barked orders: scatter, cover, hide. Men dove for shadows, pressed against rocks, weapons raised uselessly toward the heavens. The drone's camera glinted as it circled, watching, measuring, marking. She pressed herself low, eyes tracking its arc. It wasn't random, it knew exactly where they were. And that was when the truth threatened to break free from her lips, because drones didn't just appear in empty valleys. They were guided, directed, fed coordinates. Fed by someone close. Her comm crackled with the captain's voice. "It'll call in artillery if we don't move. We're running." The team bolted, desperate, like prey under a hawk's gaze. Sand kicked up, lungs burned, hearts pounded. She ran too, but with every stride the truth screamed louder in her chest. Someone had betrayed them. Someone had whispered their path, their timing, their exact location. And still she stayed silent. Not yet, not until she knew who. The drone eventually veered off, disappearing into the endless sky. The team collapsed into cover, gasping, drenched in sweat. Relief spread, but it was thin, fragile, poisoned by the knowledge that more eyes would come. The captain tried to rally them, voice sharp, brittle. "We keep moving. We reach the canyon before nightfall, no stops." Men nodded, some with resolve, some with fear. She checked her rifle again, movements precise, ritualistic, but inside her thoughts churned. How long could she hold this secret? How long before silence turned deadly? The sergeant caught her eye across the group. His look wasn't accusation, it was recognition. He knew she was holding something back, he just didn't know what. And she wondered, when the moment came, when truth and betrayal collided, would he still stand beside her? The march continued, endless steps across unforgiving ground. Shadows stretched. The sun bled into the horizon. And somewhere, just beyond their reach, fate waited. She wasn't born for war, but war had made her the keeper of truths no one wanted to face. And soon she would have to decide whether to keep them buried or set them free. Who breaks first, the body or the mind? By the fourth day, The desert had stripped them down to bone and breath. Sand clung to sweat, rifles weighed heavier, and even silence felt sharp against the skin. Men who once joked on long marches now spoke in curt grunts. Every step became a negotiation with pain. She carried it differently. Not lighter, not easier, but quieter. She had always known endurance wasn't about strength. It was about surrender, about letting pain in, letting it live inside you, until it stopped feeling like an enemy and started feeling like part of you. But not everyone could do that, and cracks were beginning to show. The young corporal stumbled again, his lips blistered, his eyes sunken. The sergeant steadied him, but his patience was thinning. "Keep up, damn it," he muttered. The corporal muttered something back, too faint to catch, but the bitterness in his voice was clear. They rested at midday, huddled in what little shade the rocks allowed. Canteens were passed, water measured to drops. The medic checked the private again, shaking his head with a look that needed no words. The captain crouched over the map, his jaw locked, eyes hard. He traced routes with a finger, muttering calculations like prayers. When he finally spoke, his tone was brittle steel. "We make the canyon by dusk. If we don't make it at all." No one argued, not aloud. She sat apart, rifle balanced across her knees, eyes scanning the horizon. But her ears never left their voices. She could hear the fatigue, the doubt, the unspoken blame. She had heard it before on other missions in other valleys, the sound of men unraveling. And through it all the truth weighed heavier in her chest. The ambush, the drone, none of it was chance. Someone had betrayed them, someone close. She closed her eyes just for a moment and the desert faded. She was back in her childhood home. Her brother's laughter filling the kitchen, the way he drummed his fingers against the table when he was nervous. He wanted to be a teacher. A simple life. He never made it. And when he died, the world had tilted off its axis. That was when she learned the cruel lesson. Sometimes betrayal isn't knives in the dark. Sometimes it's silence when you need a voice. And here she was again, caught between silence and revelation. The sergeant's voice pulled her back. "On your feet, we move." The march resumed, heat hammered down, boots scuffed against stone, every sound carried too far. By late afternoon, the canyon mouth appeared on the horizon, a jagged scar in the earth, shadows yawning wide. Relief rippled through the group, but so did unease. Canyons were shelter, but they were also traps. The captain ordered a halt, scanning the terrain through his scope. His hand trembled slightly as he lowered it. "We push in, fast." They moved single file, swallowed by stone. The air grew cooler but heavier. The walls towered, narrow and confining. Echoes multiplied, every footstep repeated a dozen times, ghosting back at them. And then came the sound. A click, metal against stone. She froze, every muscle locked, her breath caught. "Mines." "Stop," she hissed, sharp, urgent. But it was too late. The corporal, 2 steps ahead, shifted his weight, and the world exploded. Stone shattered, dust blinded. The shockwave knocked men off their feet. Ears rang, disoriented shouts tangled with screams. When the smoke cleared, the corporal lay broken, his body twisted in ways that weren't human anymore. Silence fell heavy, suffocating. The captain's face was pale fury. He spun on her, his voice a snarl. "How did you know?" Her pulse pounded, every eye turned to her. Suspicion burned hotter than grief. She met the captain's gaze, her voice low, steady. "Because this wasn't random. They knew we'd come this way." The words hung in the air, poisonous. The sergeant stepped forward, his tone cautious. "You're saying we've got a leak?" She nodded once. Murmurs erupted, fear, anger, distrust. Men glanced at one another, suspicion spreading like wildfire. The captain's voice cracked like a whip. "Enough, we don't turn on each other." But even he didn't believe it, not really. She felt the weight of their stares, the sharp edge of doubt cutting into her skin. She had known this moment would come. She had dreaded it. The sergeant studied her, his eyes narrowing. Not hostile, not trusting, searching. And for a heartbeat, she considered telling them everything. The whispers she'd heard before the mission. The way certain files had been altered, too clean, too neat. The face she suspected behind it all. But no, not yet, not without proof. If she spoke too soon, suspicion would turn on her. She had no name, no shield, just silence. They buried the corporal where he fell, a crude marker scratched into stone. No prayers, just a moment of bowed heads heavy with what-ifs. When they moved again, the air was different, not just heavy, poisoned. Every glance carried doubt, every step carried blame. She walked alone, as always, but this time she felt the weight of being apart more than ever. Night came cold and sudden. They camped in the canyon's hollow, shadows stretching long. No one spoke. She sat with her rifle, eyes scanning the darkness. Her body was steady, but her mind was burning. Because she knew now, the betrayal wasn't coming. It had already happened. And unless she found proof, unless she forced the truth into the open, more of them would die. The sergeant approached quietly, lowering himself beside her. He didn't look at her, just sat, breathing slow. Finally, he said, "You knew about the mines." She stayed silent. He nodded as if her silence was answer enough. "Whatever you're holding back, you'd better decide soon, because this team, they're not built for ghosts." Then he rose, leaving her in the dark. She exhaled, slow, deliberate, the weight in her chest heavier than ever. And as she stared into the canyon's shadows, a single thought consumed her. She hadn't been born for war, but maybe war had made her into the one thing it needed most. The question was, would it destroy her before it proved her right? When trust dies, the enemy doesn't need bullets. By morning, the canyon was no longer just stone. It was a coffin. The walls leaned in tighter, shadows grew longer, and the silence pressed on their skulls until every sound felt dangerous. No one had slept much. The corporal's blood was still in the dust, a reminder that death was walking with them. Men who once moved as a unit now staggered in fragments, eyes flicking at one another with suspicion. The captain tried to hold the line. His voice was still firm, but it carried less weight than before. Orders were followed, yes, but with hesitation, with doubt. The sergeant noticed it too. He stayed closer to the men, quieter, sharper, listening as whispers traveled like snakes through the ranks. And she felt it most of all. Ghosts had always lived in the spaces between soldiers, but now she wasn't just a shadow in their eyes. She was the question mark, the unknown. At midday, they stopped beneath an overhang, what little shade the canyon allowed. The medic cleaned rifles with mechanical precision, hands shaking just enough to betray him. Two privates argued in hushed tones, their voices breaking into brittle laughter that didn't reach their eyes. She sat apart, watching, weighing every gesture, every slip of the tongue, searching. The ambush, the mines, they weren't coincidence. Someone was guiding their enemy, step by step, bleed by bleed. The captain unfolded the map again, muttering calculations. He marked routes with the stub of a pencil, the lines jagged, unsteady. The sergeant leaned over his shoulder, voice low. "We're running on fumes, if we don't find supply or shelter soon." "We will," the captain cut him off. His tone wasn't conviction, it was desperation dressed as command. The sergeant didn't push, but his eyes shifted just briefly toward her. And that was when it happened. The private, the youngest of them, barely 20, was rummaging through his pack when something fell out. A small black device, no bigger than a matchbox. It clattered against the stone, sharp in the silence. Every head snapped toward it. The sergeant picked it up, turning it in his hand. His face darkened. Tracker. The canyon filled with the sudden roar of voices. Accusations, shouts, boots scraping against stone, rifles shifting in nervous hands. The captain barked for silence, but the air was already poisoned. The private's face drained of color, his lips trembling. I don't know how it got there." No one believed him. The sergeant's grip was iron around the device. This is how they've been ahead of us, how they knew where we'd go. His eyes burned into the private. The boy shook his head violently, tears threatening. I swear I didn't. The captain's voice was steel. Empty your pack. The private obeyed, fumbling, spilling gear onto the ground. Rations, ammo, water flask, nothing unusual. But the tracker was already enough. More than enough. The silence that followed was worse than shouting. Finally the captain spoke, his voice low, deliberate. If he's compromised, we can't risk. No. Her voice cut through, sharp, commanding in a way that startled even herself. All eyes turned to her. She rose slowly, stepping forward, meeting the captain's glare without flinching. That tracker didn't come from him. The captain's jaw tightened. You're defending him. I'm telling you what I know, she said, steady. That device is military grade, not standard issue for insurgents. Someone planted it. Murmurs spread again. The sergeant's eyes narrowed, studying her. The captain's voice sharpened. And how would you know what grade it is? For a heartbeat, silence burned. Her secret pressed against her lips, aching to be free. But not yet, not like this. Because I've seen it before, she said simply. The words landed like stones, enough to seed doubt, enough to pull the noose from the boy's neck for now. The captain didn't like it. His authority was bleeding out. He looked at her, long, hard, weighing whether she was a savior or the knife at his throat. Finally he snapped, we move now. They packed in silence. The boy clung to his rifle like it could save him from their stares. The tracker stayed in the sergeant's pocket, heavy as guilt. The march continued, boots scraping, rifles shifting, eyes darting. The canyon twisted, narrowed, widened again, and as shadows grew long, the air grew colder. That night camp was restless. Firelight flickered against stone, painting every face with suspicion. The boy sat apart, knees drawn to his chest, trembling. No one spoke to him. No one defended him except her. She brought him a canteen, set it down without a word. His eyes flicked up wide, frightened. You believe me? She didn't answer. Because belief wasn't enough. She needed proof. And proof meant risk. Later, when the camp finally settled into uneasy silence, she moved. Slow, careful, silent as breath. She searched the packs one by one, hands steady, ears sharp, until she found it. Not another tracker, something worse. A small transmitter, carefully concealed in a ration pouch, designed not to be found. Her blood ran cold. She stared at it in the dim light, heart pounding. Whoever planted the tracker had planted this too, which meant the boy was innocent, which meant the traitor was still among them. A twig snapped behind her. She spun, rifle raised. The sergeant stood there, arms folded, eyes locked on her. Neither moved. Finally he said, low and calm, you find what you were looking for. Her pulse thundered. She could lie, pretend, hide. But his gaze was steady, unflinching. Slowly she opened her hand. The transmitter gleamed between her fingers. His jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the sleeping men, then back to her. Then it's true, he whispered. She nodded once. For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then the sergeant said, we keep this between us, for now. Her brows furrowed. Why? Because if you tell them now, they'll tear each other apart before dawn. His voice was grim. We need proof, not just suspicion, otherwise we're finished. She stared at him, weighing the edge in his tone. He wasn't protecting the traitor. He was protecting the unit from itself. Finally, she closed her hand around the transmitter, sliding it into her pocket. The sergeant's eyes softened just slightly. You're not like the rest of them. Who are you really? Her breath caught, the question she dreaded, the one she couldn't answer, not yet. So she said nothing. And he didn't press. He just turned, melting back into the shadows, leaving her with the transmitter burning in her palm. She sat there the rest of the night, staring into the fire, one thought circling like a hawk. Trust was dead, betrayal was alive. And tomorrow, blood would follow. Sometimes silence saves you, other times it kills you. By dawn, the canyon air was sharp enough to cut skin. The unit moved in silence, boots grinding on loose gravel, rifles heavy in their arms. No one trusted the person beside them. The boy walked last in line, head down, every step carrying the weight of invisible chains. Even when no one said it aloud, suspicion still wrapped around his throat. He was marked. She carried the transmitter in her pocket, each step making it feel heavier. She wanted to scream, to tell them the boy was innocent, that the real enemy was still inside their ranks. But the sergeant's warning haunted her. Without proof, they'll destroy each other. The canyon narrowed. Their breaths echoed against the stone. Every sound became magnified, the scrape of boots, the click of a safety, the cough of dust in a soldier's throat. And then gunfire. Not distant, not ahead, close. Bullets cracked against rock, sparks spraying like fireworks. The men dropped instantly, returning fire, shouts echoing in the canyon walls. She rolled behind a boulder, heart pounding, rifle snapping up to her shoulder. Shadows flickered at the canyon's rim, muzzle flashes, brief and deadly. Suppressing fire, the captain barked, his voice raw, desperate. The men obeyed, rifles roaring, but she noticed something, a delay, a hesitation. Someone wasn't firing when they should have been. Her eyes cut down the line. There, one of the privates, rifle raised but finger still on the guard, pretending, waiting, watching. Her gut twisted. The ambush ended as quickly as it began. Silence rushed in, deafening, broken only by the groans of the wounded. Dust hung in the air, tasting of iron. 2 men were down. One wasn't moving. The other writhed, clutching his thigh, blood streaming through his fingers. The captain shouted for the medic. Orders flew, sharp, jagged, but no one truly listened, not anymore. Because everyone had seen what she had seen. The private. The one who hadn't fired. The sergeant moved first, his boot slamming into the private's rifle, sending it clattering across the stone. In an instant, he had him by the collar, slamming him against the canyon wall. "You think we didn't notice?" His voice was thunder. The private's face twisted with panic. I was jammed." "Liar." The captain stepped in, eyes wild. "Is this the one? Is he the reason we've been bled out piece by piece?" The canyon filled with shouts again, men closing in, fury erupting. The private shook his head violently. "No, I swear it wasn't me." And then, for the first time, she spoke. "It wasn't him." Silence fell like a blade. Every head turned, every eye fixed on her. She rose slowly, rifle slung across her back, hand slipping into her pocket. When she pulled it free, the transmitter gleamed in the sunlight. The captain froze, the sergeant's jaw clenched. She held it high. "I found this last night, hidden, not in his gear." A murmur rippled through the men. Confusion, fear, anger. The captain's voice shook. "Then whose?" She looked at the faces around her. Sweat, dirt, blood, men breaking under suspicion. She wanted to name the truth, to tear the mask away. But the truth wasn't ready, not yet. She closed her hand around the transmitter. "I don't know." The words hit harder than any bullet. The sergeant stepped close, his voice a razor meant only for her. "Why didn't you bring this to me?" "I did," she whispered back. For a moment their eyes locked. An unspoken agreement passed between them. Neither broke. But the damage was already done. The captain's authority crumbled like shale. The men no longer looked at him. They looked at her. She could feel it, the weight of command, unwanted, unasked for, pressing against her shoulders. By nightfall they camped in silence. No fire this time, no light, only the canyon's cold breath on their skin. She sat apart again, rifle across her lap, eyes scanning the shadows. But inside her mind churned. Because the transmitter wasn't the only truth she carried. Her past was still hidden, and the longer she kept it buried, the more dangerous it became. She had been trained for this, long before this unit, long before this canyon. She had worn a different uniform once in a different war. She had learned to move in silence, to see in darkness, to kill without hesitation. But she had also learned what it cost. The faces that never left you, the nights you never slept through, the weight you never dropped. She left that life, buried it, tried to live as someone else. But now it clawed back to the surface. The sergeant approached in the dark, sitting down beside her. His presence was steady, grounding. "You should have told them," he said quietly. "They'd eat each other alive." "They still might." She didn't answer. After a moment he leaned closer, his voice low. "You're not like them, you see things they don't, fight like they can't. Who trained you?" Her jaw tightened. "Does it matter?" He studied her in the dim light. "It will." Silence stretched between them, heavy, sharp. "Finally," she said, "we're not making it out of this canyon unless we stop looking at each other like enemies." The sergeant gave a bitter half-smile. "You sound more like a leader than the man who's supposed to be one." Her chest tightened. "Don't put that on me." But she knew, deep down. The unit was already shifting, orbiting around her. The silence had chosen her, even if she hadn't chosen it. That night sleep came like fragments, dreams of fire, screams, the past clawing through her skull. And then she woke to movement. A figure crouching near the packs, quiet, careful, hands searching where they didn't belong. Her rifle was in her hands before thought reached her. The click of her safety echoed too loud in the night. The figure froze. Slowly he turned. The captain. His face pale, his eyes wide. "God." For a heartbeat neither spoke. Then his lips parted, a whisper sliding through the darkness. "You don't understand." Her breath caught. The canyon's silence pressed down, waiting, listening. And in that silence she realized. The enemy wasn't out there. It was here. And it wore the rank that was supposed to protect them. What do you do when the man giving orders is the one leading you into death? The captain's face was pale in the half-light, his hands frozen above the packs. For a long moment the canyon itself seemed to hold its breath. Her rifle never wavered, barrel locked on the man who, hours earlier, had barked commands with steel in his voice. Now he was caught. His whisper rasped in the dark. "You don't understand." Her own voice was steady, though her pulse thundered. "Then make me." The fireless night pressed around them. Men shifted in uneasy sleep a few feet away. The sergeant stirred, his instincts sharp, but he hadn't seen yet. This moment belonged only to her and the captain. The captain raised his hands slowly, palms out as though facing an enemy checkpoint. "They were supposed to let us through. That was the deal." Her gut clenched. Deal. His eyes flicked toward the shadows, like the canyon itself might betray him. "We weren't supposed to be chewed apart like this. It was supposed to be a clean trade, safe passage for intel." Her grip tightened on the rifle. "You led us here." A flicker of something, guilt maybe, crossed his face. "I didn't think they'd bleed us out, they promised." She almost laughed, a sound without humor, sharp as broken glass. "You trusted a promise from the people killing us." The captain's jaw locked. "You don't know what was at stake." And in that instant she realized, he wasn't just compromised. He was convinced. He'd chosen this path long before they ever set foot in the canyon. The sergeant rose then, eyes catching the scene. His hand went to his sidearm, but she shook her head, stopping him. "Not yet." The captain's gaze hardened. "If you expose me now, they'll tear themselves apart before the enemy fires another shot. We're barely holding together as it is." She didn't lower her rifle. "So what do you suggest? that I let you keep steering us straight into their hands." The captain's voice softened, a dangerous kind of calm. "You're smart enough to see the bigger picture, smarter than the rest of them. Help me finish this and maybe we both walk out alive." Her stomach turned. The offer was rotten, but the truth beneath it was worse. He wasn't broken. He was willing. She kept her rifle steady, but inside her mind raced. If she killed him now, the unit would implode. If she spared him, he'd keep bleeding them. There was no clean choice. The sergeant stepped closer, voice low. "What's going on?" She didn't take her eyes off the captain. "He's the reason we're in this canyon. The reason they always know where to find us." The sergeant's face went rigid, the truth cutting deeper than any bullet. His voice was a growl. "You son of a—" "Quiet," the captain hissed, desperate now. "If they hear, if they wake, it's over. None of us get out alive if this turns into chaos." But it was already too late. The boy, the youngest, still haunted by suspicion, stirred awake. His eyes caught the tension, the drawn rifle, the shadows carved across their faces. Confusion spread into fear. And fear traveled fast. In seconds, the unit was stirring. Rifles shifted, bodies tensed, whispers sharpened into questions. The captain straightened, mask snapping back into place, his voice suddenly booming with command. "Everyone up, we're moving. Now." It was a bluff, a desperate attempt to drown truth with authority. But eyes lingered on her, on the rifle still aimed. The sergeant's voice cut the silence. "He's been feeding them." The canyon went still again. A single sentence, and the fracture was complete. The captain's mask cracked. His voice shook, not with fear but fury. "You don't understand what command means. The choices we have to make. Sacrifices you can't even." She stepped forward, her rifle unwavering, her voice cutting through him like steel. Sacrifice isn't trading lives for secrets. It's carrying the weight of the dead and walking forward anyway. The men shifted, torn between two centers of gravity. One held rank, the other held truth. And in that fragile balance, she saw her past reflected. Another war, another commander, another betrayal that left bodies rotting in dust. She had buried it once, tried to forget, but it had followed her here. This was the moment she had run from, the moment she had feared, the moment she was born for. The sergeant moved beside her, his stance firm, rifle half raised. A silent choice made visible. He stood with her. The captain's eyes flicked between them. He knew the tide had shifted. He could feel authority slipping from his hands, bleeding out like water into sand. And then he ran. Not toward them, away. His boots hammered against stone, his shadow vanishing into the canyon's teeth. Shouts erupted, rifles snapped up, but she raised her hand, sharp, stopping them. "No." Confusion rippled. She spoke with a calm she didn't feel. "He's not running from us, he's running to them." The sergeant's eyes narrowed. "Then we follow." Her jaw tightened. "No, we set the ground first. If he's going to deliver us, then we decide what he delivers." The canyon wind moaned low, carrying dust through the dark. Every face was watching her now, searching for something, certainty, direction, hope. She felt the weight of it pressing heavy into her chest. She had never wanted command, never asked for it, but silence had chosen her, and there was no turning back. She lowered her rifle at last. "We hold until dawn. Then we move together, not as his men, as our own." The sergeant gave a tight nod. The others hesitated, but one by one they settled. The canyon swallowed its secrets again, but the truth was out. The captain was gone, and the war was no longer about survival. It was about betrayal and what to do with it. That night she sat awake while the others drifted into uneasy rest. The stars burned cold above the canyon walls. Her fingers traced the scar on her wrist, an old memory, a reminder of where silence had once failed her. This time she promised herself it would not. But the question gnawed, heavy and unrelenting. When the moment came, when the captain faced her again, would she be ready to do what history demanded? Sometimes the last bullet isn't fired at the enemy. It's fired at silence itself. Dawn crawled into the canyon slow and merciless. The light was pale, thin, slipping across jagged stone like a blade searching for wounds. The men stirred with it, their faces drawn, eyes hollow. They were not the same unit that had entered this canyon. Trust was gone. Rank was gone. What remained was raw bone and grit and the thin thread of survival. She stood apart, rifle slung, eyes scanning the horizon where the captain had vanished hours earlier. He would be back. She knew it as surely as she knew the taste of blood in her mouth. The sergeant approached, boots crunching on gravel. His voice was quiet but steady. When he returns, it won't be alone. She nodded. That's why we choose the ground now. The canyon floor was treacherous, but the walls gave cover. Angles for fire, places to disappear. She directed them without raising her voice, without claiming command. Yet they followed. By the time the sun cleared the rim, the unit was hidden in stone and shadow, waiting. Minutes stretched into hours. The heat grew, pressing against their skin. Sweat burned their eyes, thirst carved their throats, but no one moved. And then they came. First the captain, his figure emerging from the canyon bend, shoulders squared, stride deliberate, not the gait of a man defeated, the gait of a man leading. Behind him shadows, half a dozen figures, rifles slung, faces hard with purpose, the enemy. The captain's voice carried across the canyon, cold, sharp. You don't have to die here. Lay down your weapons and they'll let you walk out. This doesn't have to be the end. Her blood iced, not because of the threat, because of the lie. She could hear it in his tone. There would be no mercy. The sergeant rose from cover just enough for his voice to carry. And you walk free while we rot. The captain's eyes flicked toward him, then to her. I walk because I made a choice you were too blind to make. War isn't about honor, it's about survival. Her voice rang out, cutting through the dust-thick air. Survival isn't betrayal. For a moment silence pressed down. The men waited, the enemy waited. Even the canyon seemed to hold still. The captain's gaze locked on her. You think you can lead them out? You don't even belong here. You've been hiding since the day you arrived. Her chest tightened, because he wasn't wrong. She had hidden her past, her training, the truth of who she was. But hiding time was over. She stepped forward into the open, rifle in hand, her voice steady as stone. You're right. I wasn't born for war, but I've carried it. I've buried it. And I won't let you write our end in betrayal. Something flickered in the captain's eyes. Not fear, not regret, something harder. A man too far gone to turn back. He raised his hand, a signal. The canyon erupted. Gunfire cracked, ricocheting off stone. Dust exploded upward. Men shouted, scrambled. The enemy surged forward, rifles spitting flame. She dropped into cover, rifle snapping to her shoulder. Sights steady. Breath even. Every shot she fired was deliberate, controlled. She didn't waste, she didn't panic. The unit held, shaken, bleeding, but holding. Because for the first time they weren't moving on orders barked from rank. They were moving on instinct, on survival, on trust rebuilt in the shadow of betrayal. The sergeant fought like stone, immovable, relentless. The boy, once broken, fired with a steadiness born of desperation. Even the medic, shaking, became a shield. But still they were outnumbered, pinned. And the captain moved like a phantom, sliding between enemy positions, pointing, guiding, cutting them down piece by piece. Until she saw him. Across the canyon floor, crouched behind stone, rifle in his hands. His eyes locked on hers. Time thinned. Bullets blurred around her, screams ripped the air, but all she saw was him. The man who had worn rank like armor. The man who had dragged them here. The man who had chosen betrayal over brotherhood. Her finger tightened on the trigger. But for a heartbeat, doubt clawed at her. Could she, not just kill him, but end him, end what he represented? Her hands trembled. Then the sergeant's voice cut through the storm. "If you don't, we're finished." The doubt vanished. Her shot cracked, echoing through the canyon. The captain staggered, dropped to one knee, blood blooming across his chest. But he wasn't done. His rifle snapped up, desperate, shaking, aimed at the boy. She didn't think, didn't breathe. Her second shot split the air. The captain's body crumpled into dust. And with it the enemy faltered. Their momentum broke, their advance splintered. The unit surged, pressing, clawing, forcing them back, until at last the canyon fell silent again. Only the wind remained. Bodies littered the ground, dust hung heavy, the air reeked of blood and smoke. She stood over the captain's corpse, rifle slack in her hands. His eyes were open, glassy, staring into nothing. For a long moment she only looked, not with triumph, not with relief, with sorrow. Because betrayal never truly dies. It just leaves a scar too deep to forget. The sergeant approached, face streaked with dust and blood. He looked at her, not as a soldier, not as a stranger, as something more. "You saved them," he said simply. She shook her head. "No, we saved each other." Around them the unit gathered, broken, battered, fewer than before, but alive. The boy looked at her with wide eyes, not the eyes of suspicion, the eyes of someone who had been carried out of fire. She turned her gaze to the canyon walls, to the sliver of sky above, blue, endless, free. They would climb, they would walk, they would bleed their way out, not because orders said so, because they chose to. Her chest rose steady. Her voice was quiet, meant only for herself. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. And with that she slung her rifle, turned toward the light, and led them forward, into a silence that no betrayal could ever touch again.